Hey you guys, Matt Allen here. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin. Today we've got another gear review for you. We just got back from the Bassmaster Classic where they launched all sorts of amazing new products. And today we're going to take a look at some of my favorites. There were so many new products that came to market at the Classic, it was almost overwhelming. I mean, from rods and reels, to baits and gear, to boats. It was mind-blowing. If you've never attended a Classic, it's absolutely worth it. The expo alone is worth attending. We saw so many things, probably 2 to 3 gear reviews worth of new stuff that really stood out to me. We'll probably have to break it up over the coming months, but today is just that right off the top, my absolute favorites. We've got a bunch of stuff here that we're going to cover in no particular order, although I am going to start with Tim and I's brand new product launches. We launched 2 new items in line with the Classic, both with dirty jigs. The first one is our TacticalBassin Underspin, and the other one is the screwed up Swimbait Head. We're really excited about both of these. Let's talk about the Underspin first. We have had both of these projects in the works literally for years. I'm so glad that they've come to market. So here is our Underspin. Here's one rigged up with a 2.8 Kitech for a reference. Now we've done some things with this little Underspin that are very, very unique, because anytime Tim and I bring something to market, there's a reason, whether that be our wake bait, whether that be any of the hooks and heads that we've done over the years, our crankbaits, sunglasses, right? Regardless of the item, it's always because there is a hole in the market. There is a need. Somebody's got to fill it. Nobody's filling it. So Tim and I are like, okay, that's it. We're doing it, and we're doing it right. So this little guy right here, the Tactical Underspin, came about because there are a bunch of phenomenal underspins on the market, but none of them were perfect. Now, I'm sure there'll be plenty of people that don't think this one is either, but in my opinion, it is perfect. Sorry, I don't want my trash blowing out of the boat over here. Let me walk you through this. So the first thing you're going to notice is that head right there. That head looks familiar. That is the Dirty Jigs Guppy head. The little tiny swimbait head that we've been using for years. I actually had a hand in the original design of the Guppy head years ago. It's a phenomenal platform to build from. So as soon as we decided, yes, we're gonna go ahead with a Finesse Underspin, no question, we wanted to work off of that existing Guppy head because it's such a stable, solid head to work from. Now, there are some things that are completely different here. First off, this is a 1/0 hook, but it's a heavy wire hook. That is not the hook that's in the Dirty Jigs Guppy head at all. This is a very, very stout 1/0. You can throw this on 6-pound line, but you can throw this on 10 and 12-pound line also. Very, very stout hook. The biggest detail that I want to point out to you guys, see this right here? See how smooth it is? That is everything, that smooth surface. When a bass comes in and clamps down on a bait, take a Kitech. Most underspins have a barb in here of some kind, whether that's a metal barb, a lead barb, whatever. Everybody's got a keeper in there. When the fish come in and they clamp down on that, boom, you stick them in the roof of the mouth, their lip just grinds on that barb and your baits are ruined immediately. That has always driven me nuts. And it's almost like one company does it, so the next guy does it, so the next and the next and the next, because it's not right. So we went ahead and completely smoothed that surface, and we went with a big lead barb on the bottom where it doesn't matter and it's out of the way. The result is that you can go fish after fish after fish after fish, and they're not tearing up that bait. The baits last significantly longer, and that was the first thing that we wanted to accomplish. We wanted a head that would tangibly fish longer for a guy, so you're not going through so many baits. And then the other thing that we did, we went with a solid arm here. There's about half a dozen different ways that you can do an underspin. We went with an arm, and you'll notice it's a long arm. The result is that this blade sits low. That allows you to throw this with a bunch of different swim baits, because most of the really small underspins, you can usually get away with a 2.8 Kitech, but not always. Even a 2.8, sometimes underspins, that blade will be up here and it'll just end up cupped against the belly of that thing because it touches, it rubs, and it won't actually spin. That drives me nuts. I've felt like that needed to be corrected for years. So we went with a longer drop arm, and I mean, it's exact. This will clear a 2.8 and a 3.3 Fat Swing Impact Kitech. It'll clear a 3 and a 3.5 Storm Largo Shad. It'll clear a 3.5. It will even clear a 4-inch X-Zone Swammer. I'm telling you, you could take a bunch of different baits and fish them on there, and at any speed, that blade is going to continue to turn. Again, we weren't just trying to add something to the market. Tim and I couldn't care less about that. We were trying to solve some real problems so that we had a head that would be way more universal. It could be fished ultra finesse, but you could also power up and use it for largemouth, big spotted bass, big smallmouth without any issues. And it would be functional with a bunch of different baits, and those baits would last. Again, we were trying to solve a lot of problems at once, and I'm very, very confident that we did that. You can get it with silver blades as well as gold blades. Comes in 4 sizes, 8/8, 3/16, quarter, and 3/8. Those are the main sizes that Tim and I use, so that's the size range we built it in. Maybe down the road somewhere we'll go with a bigger hook and heavier heads or something, I don't know. But this was the size that I felt was most critical, and Tim and I have been working on this, like I said, for years. We're really excited about it. Now let's talk about the screwed up head, and then we'll jump into all this other gear. The screwed up head, as the name might suggest, has a screw lock on it. Again, completely different than what you're used to. There are tons of screw locks on the market. We came up with this idea a really long time ago. I mean, I said years, but I mean like 6 years ago we wanted to do this. Things take time to get right. So this is the Matt Allen swim bait head. This is the tactical screwed up head. You might notice they're almost identical. Same hook, same head design, completely different keeper arrangement. Some people like a barb, some people like a screw lock. We now have both. But here's the big deal. Let me hold these. Actually, I'm just gonna open these packs up and dig one out. We use 2 different sizes of screw lock. On our smaller heads, because this comes in a full range of sizes. In the smaller heads, we have 1 size screw, which is still a large, oversized screw lock, but it's not outrageous. On our heavier heads, 3/8, half, 3/4, it's a much larger screw lock. Completely oversized. As far as I know, the biggest in the industry. I'm not aware of any others like it. In fact, in order to pull this off, Brooks, that's who we worked with at Dirty Jigs to do this. Brooks went completely outside the industry and had to source the material for this outside of bass fishing to pull this off. We wanted a giant oversized screw so that you could take a 4.3 or a 4.8 Kitech, or a larger swammer, or the big Largo, or any number of other great swim baits. And when you screwed that thing on here, it's locked. This isn't a tiny little keeper where you're going to screw it into that swim bait and then when you pull it just cores the swim bait, right? It just rips the guts of the swim bait out. It's an oversized screw. It's super strong, so it can screw into those bigger baits and it can actually do it. I fished this all the way up to like a 6.8 Kitech with the heavier heads. I love it. Absolutely love it. So if you're a screw lock guy, we went with the screw lock. But again, it's not just another screw lock. We took the proven Matt Allen head design, and then we went with a stronger and much larger screw lock so that it will truly lock those baits down and hold them. I mean, you screw a big Kitech on there and you start tugging and you have to rip that Kitech in half to get it off. It's amazing. So those are Tim and I's new designs that we're super excited about. We hope you guys enjoy them too. With that said, I have no rhyme or reason to the rest of this. I'm just gonna start grabbing and going. Let's talk about this one. Megabass. Probably the coolest thing I saw come from Megabass at the show was the Sleeper Craw. You guys are probably familiar with the Megabass Dark Sleeper, or last year, the Sleeper Gill. Now there is a Sleeper Craw. Very interesting bait. Now, let me just come out the gate and say this. Historically speaking, in my fishing, really natural craw profiles don't really work that well for me until now. And I'm amazed by that, to be honest. I was shocked when I mean, it's a really cool design and I was like, man, I'm gonna go fish with that and we're just gonna see. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, true natural craw profiles, they're not really my thing, but I'm gonna try it. I have blasted fish on this thing in a very short amount of time. Since I got my hands on these, I have been trashing fish with them. It's amazing. So first off, the bait itself is made of an extremely durable, stretchy plastic. I don't know exactly what it is, but this is not your typical material. It is a very, very durable bait. So you're not talking about a fish or two and tearing a bait up. I'm saying this is the one that I have caught a ton of fish on and it looks completely brand new. And I mean, I have blasted them with it. Let's talk about the bait itself first, and then I'll explain how I've been fishing it, because I think that will give you some insight. The bait itself, the arms are hollow cavities. They want to float up. They want to sit in that defensive posture on the bottom. The body itself is hollowed out. So if I open this up, you'll see there's your exposed hook. It's a smaller hook, but it's a heavy wire hook. When I sat and looked at this, I was like, okay, I'm gonna fish with it. What rod do I even use with this? Because it's such a unique bait. So I got a Dark Sleeper out and I put them side by side and I'm looking at them and I'm like, man, that hook looks really similar. I don't know that it's the same hook, but it's really similar. And the way that that hook is protected is really similar. So again, there's a slit in the bait that that hook is laying in. And then it's a hollow cavity inside. So it collapses really easily to expose that hook point. Hopefully you can see that. So I just went ahead and grabbed my Dark Sleeper rod. That's literally the Megabass P5 Dark Sleeper, 12-pound fluorocarbon with an Aldebaran. This is what I throw my Dark Sleeper with every time that I ever throw a Dark Sleeper. It's a dedicated rod for that. I thought if I could set a Dark Sleeper hook with it, I could totally set this hook with it too on that Sleeper Craw. I'm gonna go out and give it a try. I wasn't sure how to fish it, and my lake had been pretty murky. I've got clear water here, but it had been pretty murky. So the first thing I did is I went out and I started flipping docks with it. What this has basically turned into for me is anywhere that I'll throw a finesse jig or a shaky head in the spring, or what I think you will see me do with it this fall is anywhere I throw a finesse football jig. This is totally gonna work too. So the first thing I did is I went dock fishing with it, literally skipping it under docks, and it skips. I mean, it skips like a dream. You could shoot it back up under docks. And I just started fishing up under docks, fishing dock pilings, and that started working. I started catching fish that way. And then when I realized, oh man, I might finally have my hands on a craw profile that catches fish, I went offshore with it. I started fishing some offshore structure, some creek channel bends, and just opened up on them. So I'm literally fishing it like a jig. The thing about this bait that I think is so cool is it sits in that defensive posture. So it's hard to do here, but it sits on the bottom like this, claws up. And I like to be pretty aggressive with it. I give it these little hops or double hops, and it'll puff up the bottom, and then those claws rise up, and those claws kind of float there above the bait. And that is when I'm getting smacked. I had a bunch of times where I'd kind of be pulling it along, and it would get that funny feeling, like maybe a fish ran up on it, or maybe a fish came up and like nipped at the claws. And when I would feel that, I'd give it a good snap up off the bottom. I'd hop it up, and as soon as I did that, dong! I mean, they would wreck this thing. It's awesome. And then again, they're crushing it, but they're not actually wrecking it. I have caught a pile of fish on this exact one, and it is continuing to go strong. So we better move on. We've got a bunch of things here to talk about, but I will link, if you're not familiar with what we're doing here with our gear reviews, in the video description, depending on the device you're on, you might have to click more. You might have to click the 3 little dots down below the video, but there is a way to open the description below the video, and that will open up, and I'll link all of these items in the order that we talk about them, with favorite sizes, favorite colors. Maybe there's a specific rod that I throw with it, something like that. We'll give you all that information so that you're not trying to guess and figure out what that was. All right, next up, let's talk about a hook. Actually, let's talk about a bunch of hooks. VMC at the show launched, actually I think it was just before the show, launched their Redline series. So I had to scoop a bunch up. These Redline hooks are really interesting. I pulled a couple out for you. It's an entire line, okay? So everything from a Nico hook to a drop shot hook to big worm hooks, I mean, you name it, treble hooks, it's an entire line. All of the hooks are PTFE coated. They're slick hooks, that's what that means. They've got that slick coating on them, so it's easier to set the hook. They want to slide. And if you sit here and mess with them, you're gonna end up sticking yourself because they're slippery. They'll stick you. They've got a needle point on them. They're made of vanadium steel. I mean, I'm literally going off the package right now. Vanadium steel, according to the packaging, they're 25% stronger. I will say this, I've already caught a pile of fish on that wide gap hook, and it's solid. So I'm willing to buy that it's made of a stronger steel. It's a very, very solid hook. Caught a bunch of big worm fish on it. I've really enjoyed fishing with that. Now, I grabbed, these packages aren't random, okay? I grabbed the ones that stood out to me the most. This one, I have not got to put the time into yet. The reason why I'm bringing it up, this is their Finesse Treble. This screams jerkbaits to me. You guys know how I am about my jerkbait trebles. I will play with this one and report back. I have not done it yet, but it's got the vibe. It's got the bend I like. It's got the shape I like. It's got that coating on it. It's got all the things that might be great. Again, this is a first look on some of this stuff. Some of it I've put a ton of time into. I fished that wide gap hook a bunch. This one I have not yet, but it speaks to me. The drop shot hook is a really cool hook. Their drop shot hook has, you guys know how much we love that Owner Mosquito Light. This is like half a power above that. It's not a Mosquito Light. It's not a heavy duty drop shot hook. It's somewhere in between, and it's got a deeper throat, which I really like, especially with those thicker minnow style baits where the head of the bait is a little thicker, maybe like a net bait STH, that style of minnow drop shot worm. I think that will work really well in. We already talked about the wide gap, and then this one right here. Okay, this is the Finesse Nico hook. I think this is the coolest hook in the lineup. I pulled one out. They make it all the way down to a size 6. That's tiny. This is the size 4, okay? One other thing about all of these hooks. So we talked about the coating. They also have sealed eyes. Can you guys see that? They coat, I don't know what the coating is, but they coat the base of those eyes so that you won't cut your line. You're never gonna tie a knot and then have that knot get twisted and you go to set the hook and it just snaps off. that is a problem. Coating it like that completely eliminates that. You can't get your knot down in there and get it stuck. So this little guy has that, but it also has this awesome little keeper on it. Okay, here's the deal. I could not, just being honest, I couldn't care less about using this Finesse Nico hook for Nico rigging. This, to me, I rigged one up. You guys know that we're fanatical about bait finesse, BFS, and there's some bait finesse baits coming. We love this style of fishing, that ultra light fishing with bait casters. Super light line, super small baits. It just makes fishing more fun. Check this out. This little guy right here, 1/16 ounce tungsten to this little guy right here. And you know what? We're not even doing a review of this little craw bait today, but I'm gonna link it down in the description anyway, because that is an awesome, awesome little bait that I have been playing with. But the big deal here is that that hook in there, that is the world's smallest little Texas rig. It's unreal. And that little Rains craw on there, that's their little 2-inch craw, and that thing is bad. But that setup right there, I'm Texas rig fishing just like I would a big creature bait, but I'm doing it with 6-pound fluorocarbon on a super lightweight bait caster. And I can still set that hook no problem. See that little size 6 sticking out of there? But here's the deal. When fish get crystal clear water, fish get finicky, funky weather comes in, they don't want to bite. When you drop down to something like this, you can still get bit. And that little Finesse Nico hook, can you see how little of the hook is sticking out underneath that craw? I mean, when a fish comes down to inspect this, there's almost nothing there except bait. Almost the entire hook is hidden. So I find it kind of funny. The coolest hook to me in that entire line of Redline hooks, I'm not even going to use for the thing that they had in mind, but it's just an awesome, awesome little hook. Okay, let's move on. A couple of big items and then we'll go back to baits. Right here. This is the new Daiwa Tatula Elite line of rods. Daiwa Tatula Elites have been out for years, but they just completely revamped the line. The color changed a little bit. There's still that silver, but it's more of like a gunmetal silver. It's a little darker. The biggest thing that I noticed right away when I looked at that line of rods is that there were a ton more of them. If I'm not mistaken, like the regular casting rods, they went from like 8 to 18. There's a ton more models. They really expanded with a bunch of really cool actions. They also added a few full handle cork handle rods. So I went and bought myself one. This specific one, this is the 7.6. They call it the Big Worm. This is, who is it? Patrick Walters rod. But it's a 7.6 medium heavy full grip, and I really like it. Again, I've only played with it a little bit, but I went straight out and bought one. I wanted to try it right away. So far, I've been very impressed. And again, this is more of a first look where I've only fished with it a little bit. I'll continue to expand on it going forward. You'll probably get a report back later, but I was very impressed with how much wider that line of rods is now. Let's do a reel. This is awesome. Let's just jump to the punchline. This is the Shimano Calcutta Conquest MD. It's a mouthful. This is one bad reel. Now, I am a tackle fanatic. I have been for a long time. You guys know it. It's one of my favorite things is doing these videos, and the reason why is because it lets my inner tackle junkie just go crazy. I get to try and buy and justify buying all sorts of things. I love it. I've been a tackle junkie for so long that I can find just about anything right away. I know where to look. This was one reel that I was not able to track down. So this is not my reel. This is truly a first look. I could not source one. Now, a lot of this stuff is already on the market and you can get it. Some of these things are coming very soon and I just knew where to look and I was able to track one down ahead of time. This guy right here, I knew where to look, but I could not get one. But I found somebody who was able to get one, so I borrowed their reel just so that we could take a look at it together. Unfortunately, I have to give this one back, and I will be waiting just like everyone else for my pre-order to ship. But this reel, phenomenal. This is truly the coolest high-end swim bait reel that I've put my hands on. So you guys know I love the Tranks. That's my main swim bait reel. I throw a Tranks a lot. In fact, I've got 2 of them sitting right here. Love them. I love throwing swim baits on low profile reels, but I wasn't always that way. I still have a ton of full size round reels, 300 and 400 size round reels, because this is how I always swim baited in the past. Calcutta TE is an unbelievable reel. This is a Calcutta Te300. When I went away from round reels, I did it because the low profiles had gotten so good. Low profile reels are more comfortable in the hand, but they never had the strength and the durability that the round reels had. But they finally got good enough that I made a full switch. But check this out. This is a Calcutta Te300. Some of you guys might remember that reel. This is that Conquest MD 300. See anything surprising about that? It is literally a low profile round reel. Look how much smaller it is. They're both 300s. It's the same size spool. That right there is enough to convert me back to round reels. I love round reels. The strength, the power, mind-blowing. This reel comes with a giant oversized handle on it. They've done so much to this thing. It's designed to be just an incredible swim bait and glide bait reel, but it's sealed so you can cross over into salt water. It is a killer all around super high-end swim bait reel. I'm really, really glad that I was able to get my hands on one, that I got to spend a little bit of time with it, opened it up, took it apart, really looked at it, put it all back together. And I am anxiously waiting, just like everybody else, to actually get to beat the snot out of one. I'm really looking forward to it. This will be the first time in the last few years that I started swim baiting heavily on a round reel. I'm not taking anything away from my Tranks. My Tranks are incredible. The 300 HG Tranks is my favorite swim bait reel that I have ever owned out of all the reels I've ever used. But there's something special about the feel, being connected with that high-end round reel, and I'm really looking forward to doing that again now that it is a totally palmable, super comfortable in the hand reel. That's awesome. All right, you guys are doing good. We've only got 4-ish more. Got a few more here. This is really cool. Damiki did something that I felt was inevitable, and I'm really glad that somebody took the lead. We've been talking bait finesse for a couple of years now. The Curado BFS came out, and that just set the US ablaze, right? Bait finesse has been going for decades in Japan, but the Curado BFS coming to the US, that was what really brought it here, because it made bait finesse affordable to the average US angler. Historically, bait finesse rods and reels are outrageously priced and hard to get. So, fast forward to these baits. Sorry about that, the camera decided to overheat, so we had to take a little break there. What I was about to say is that it was a matter of time before one of the major brands in the industry started building baits specifically for bait finesse. And I am so excited to see that, because nothing that I have run into in the last few years has made fishing more fun than bait finesse has for me. I can go out on a body of water and catch tiny bass and have an absolute blast. And if I happen to hook a giant on that ultralight tackle, I am in for a wild ride. It is so much fun. So any brand that will support bait finesse and bring baits to market specifically for that so that we can have more fun, I'm all for it. So Damiki came out with 3 bait finesse baits. The first one is this little popper. Check that dude out. This little bait is so dialed, and I've already fished it a bunch, and it's totally fishy. Fishes just like any other popper, just a whole lot smaller. Little tiny micro hooks. You could throw this thing on 4 and 5 pound line. You can set those hooks no problem, but you could still throw it on 6, 7, 8 pound line too. But little tiny hooks, little tiny body, perfectly imitating those little tiny bait fish we see popping dirt shallow that you can never imitate. There it is. And then 2 crankbaits. They did a square bill and a deep diver, and they both fish really well. I'm very impressed by all 3. I think it's awesome that somebody jumped out there and built some baits specifically for BFS. I think that is really cool. Hopefully there are more to come, but I'm really glad to see companies supporting this trend, because I really think bait finesse is here to stay. It will explode in the US in the coming years, because again, it just makes your day on the water more enjoyable. And that is what it's all about. All right, next up from Shimano. They came out with a new jerkbait, the Zumverno 95 SP. It's no secret how much we like the World Minnow. It's got that flash boost in it. I'm doing my best to hold that thing still, and you can see that flash boost still moving in there. I have crushed them on the World Minnow. Well, the Zumverno is not a smaller World Minnow, but it is a very, very similar profile. So it's a 95 size. It's got flash boost in it. It's got a sliding weight system in it, so you can send that thing. It casts really, really well for a small jerkbait. I mean, you can really send it. It's got good stock hardware. The first thing I noticed with the Zumverno when I started playing with it is it's even more erratic than the World Minnow. I love baits that flash and shine and throw light in the springtime. I think it makes a huge difference, and this is a very, very erratic bait. Super darty, tons of light flashing, tons of shine. I'm very impressed with this. I'm very glad to see that smaller profile, that true 95 size. I do a lot of damage with smaller jerkbaits in the spring. Big fish go shallow, right? Giants need to spawn, so they start moving up, but they're not necessarily comfortable up there. Sometimes I throw giant baits for them, and I can get those fish to bite. But sometimes, especially when the water gets clear, I go to those smaller profiles. I mean, I keep talking bait finesse, right? Little micro baits. A downsized jerk bait can get those fish too. I've caught a lot of really big ones over the years on smaller jerk baits in the spring, and I just love how erratic this bait is. I also love that they kept 3 hooks. I love 3 hooks on jerk baits. I've got some jerk baits I really like that have 2 hooks, but given a choice, I put 3 on them, because when fish come up and slash those things, you've just got better odds that one of those hook points is going to catch. But I'm really impressed with that jerk bait and looking forward to putting a lot more time into it. Next up, Yamamoto introduced the Yamamoto Tanuki. I think I said that right. This crazy looking bait, crazy looking. is very interesting to me. This little bait is in the category of heavy baits that we've been seeing the last few years. There are a handful of super popular heavy baits that don't do a whole lot in your hand. You look at them and you're like, what on earth is that? The Depths Cover Scat is one of those heavy plastic baits that you're like, really? And then you fish with it and fish are just pounding on that thing and you're like, okay, I get it, I'll throw it. I don't understand it, but I'll throw it. This is a really interesting one. At least they added something to it where you're like, well, it does something, right? But seriously, here's the ticket with these things. This bait, by the way, the company, when Yamamoto announced this bait, they said that this is not a new bait. I wasn't aware that this bait was in the Japanese market for years. I had not seen it until they launched it here at the Classic. But apparently this bait has been in the Japanese market for years, and Yamamoto said that it was the first of the heavy baits. This is the one that kicked off that trend. It wasn't the first one I got my hands on, but that's really interesting information. Now, here I want to explain what these are, what makes them different, because in your hand, you're like, nope, not falling for that, not gonna throw that. I've been scammed before, right? I mean, it doesn't look like a whole lot to me. It's got a hook slot on either side, and that's about all it's got. This whole heavy plastic thing, these baits are designed to sink really quickly. You fish them weightless. Here's one rigged up. In fact, that's on that Redline wide gap 4-aught, as a matter of fact. That's what's in there. So you rig it weightless, stick that hook point, and that's it. All of these heavy baits, I like to fish them weightless. Throw them out, let them go to bottom. But what makes them unique, probably the best way I can explain this bait, because I've actually put a bunch of time into this already, and I really, really like it. Think of this as a 1-2 punch with a Senko. This is the best way I can think to explain it. Because again, I know that a guy's looking at that and he's like, but I want you to hear me out. We all said that about a Senko too. You remember that? The first time you saw a Senko, you're like, yeah, I'm not throwing that. And then some guy beat you down in a tournament. We're all like, is he lying? Is that really what he caught him on? So check this out. Think of this and a Senko as a 1-2 punch. In my mind, they're almost polar opposites, even though we're fishing them very similarly. Fish them both weightless, but this one weighs a lot more and sinks a lot faster, okay? A Senko is all about the fall to the bottom. All the magic happens on the way down. That bait's falling and a bass comes out and gets it. If that bait hits the bottom, you can pop it back up, fall again, maybe you'll get bit there too. But the majority of your Senko bites come on that fall. For me so far, and with this category over the last couple of years, because this is a new bait to me, but the category is not, it's the exact opposite. The baits have a little shimmy on their way down, particularly this one, because it's got this on it. So it gets a little bit of movement on the way down. But it's not about the fall, it's the opposite. A Senko is about the fall. A Yamamoto Tanuki is about the rise. What I mean is that because these baits are so stumpy and they're heavy, that for me the action is not on the way down, it's when I pop them back up. The fish react, they dart out and they eat them. So, shallower water, I'm going here. Deeper, clearer water, that Senko fall is important, I'm still throwing a Senko. But shallower water where I couldn't care less about the fall, I want to get them to react. Murkier water, fishing around structure where I know the fish are there, I'm going here. Again, I throw it out, I let it go to bottom, and then I'm aggressive with this bait. And not just this bait, all the baits in this category. I like to pop them up, and I don't just pop them once, I hit them 2 to 3 times. Pop, 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 and then slack them out. And they'll pop, 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 they jump and they'll dart and you don't know what they're gonna do. Sometimes they pop up, sometimes they'll do an underwater walk the dog, and then as soon as it does whatever it's gonna do, it starts this like backslide, then a little bit of a fall. and then I pop it up again, boom, boom, boom. Backslide, little fall. It's all about that reaction strike when I snap that thing up. I pop it up and right at the top, dong, there they are. Complete opposite of a Senko, but a very good 1-2 punch. You remember how good a Senko used to work. They still crush today. I catch a bass on a Senko every day of my life. But when a Senko first came out, they were out of this world. This category of baits has been exploding over the last couple of years because, again, they work so well. It's a reverse of that stick bait, and it's a bait that is not going to speak to somebody when they see it on a shelf or they have it in their hand. It's just not until you experience it, or you're on the boat and somebody kicks your rear with it and you're like, oh, show me how you worked that. That's when it finally stands out. A very interesting category of baits that is growing. And then last but not least is this guy. This is the Jackal Blast Bone Junior. So Jackal came out with the Blast Bone. This is the smaller size. I grabbed this bait because it's super affordable in the swim bait category. And it's a smaller profile, so you could throw this on a standard medium to medium heavy rod. But if you want to play around with the whole swim bait thing, this is a really fun bait to fish up around shallow cover. It wants to dive, so it's a slow sink. I'm sorry, it's a slow float. So it slowly comes back to the top, but it's not a wake bait. It's not working a big V wake on the surface. It's a crank down. So when you wind it, it's gonna swim down. It's got a really cool swim to it. You could throw it right up around shallow cover and bump it along. But what makes this bait really unique is you can walk the dog with it underwater. Chop, 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 chop. That bait will dance underwater, especially when you've got murky water. When those fish are pushing up shallow this time of year, you can walk, 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 walk that thing underwater and then pause it, and it does this super slow pop back up to the surface. But it's a really cool bait, whether you want to walk it subsurface or just steady crank it. It's a really cool bait. It's got small enough hooks. It's a small enough bait. You can throw it on standard tackle. You can throw it on 15-pound line. And it's, in the swim bait game, super affordable, which I think is a really cool bait to play with. All right, guys, I think, yep, that wraps us up. Like I said, there will probably be a couple more gear reviews based on product from those classic launches, but we've got to spend more time getting to know them, testing them, trying to break them. Some of these things I've already put a ton of time into. A couple of these, just that first look, right? But I'm so excited to get my hands on one and get to go put it through the paces. Again, down in the video description, I'll link all of this in the exact order that we talked about it. I'll give you my favorite sizes, colors, related hooks, whatever it might be that you need so that you can be dialed in. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you soon.